Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. This show is brought to you by Auto Rescue Tools and Isaac Rodell. If you've been looking for a programming laptop, but you're not sure which one to buy or how to set it up, especially if you want to program multiple brands. You know, you've got some domestic vehicles, you've got European vehicles. Can the same software go on the same laptop? What size hard drive do I need? All those questions. Isaac's your guy. He can custom set up programming laptops that are ready to tackle any make or model. I got one of these laptops myself, and I can say that it is outstanding, and it really streamlines the process by having everything you need in one device. So if you're looking for something like that, I highly recommend checking out autorescuetools.com. You'll also find scan tools, diagnostic equipment, key cutting equipment, and much more. Check out the link in the show notes. I highly recommend it. Hey, what's up, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I'll be your host once again for this week's episode. You got just me, but thank you for joining me on the show. And as always, thank you for all the feedback and kind words about the show. I always like interacting with people. I've said this before, if I don't get back to you right away, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just busy. And it's one of those things where, like, you look at your phone and maybe you open up a message and then you're about to respond and then you get a phone call or you get a distraction, which happens a lot, especially during the week. And then I forget to get back to it. And then I see it later. I'm like, oh, shoot, I never messaged that person back or whatever. So anyways, like I say, if I don't get back to you right away, not ignoring, just probably got distracted or I'm busy, and I try to get back to everybody because I do appreciate all the listeners of the show. It's why I do it still is try to share some information out there, try to help everybody out, and move this thing along together. It's not easy. We're up against a lot of challenges. We've got to take whatever help we can get, and that's kind of the premise of today's show that I just wanted to share some thoughts about was what I'm doing right now to utilize artificial intelligence, AI, specifically large language models, to assist me and help me out in the day-to-day. What I'm using them for. And I'm planning to actually have a couple other people on here to talk about AI more in general, maybe some of the concerns or our thoughts in regards to the industry. So there's a whole conversation to be had there that I definitely think is warranted. But for today, I'm just going to talk about, right now in September of 2025, what am I using AI for that's helping me out the most, that is moving the needle for me in specific areas that I found really beneficial, right? The cost of, what it actually costs me for these tools and these services versus what I get out of it. Where am I seeing the best bang for your buck, right? And I mean, most of these platforms, I don't care which one you use, you're paying probably about $20 a month for, the premium version of it. You can pay more, and I think there's free versions of a lot of these. But if you're paying the $20 a month and what you can get out of these tools, if you utilize them properly, it's insane. The amount, again, dollar to output, it's crazy small. Because you can really do a lot. And part of it's only limited by your imagination and willingness to learn these tools. But man, if you can learn these tools, you're going to be so much better for it in so many different ways. Now, there is a potential downside to this. And again, that's more of a conversation I'm hoping to have with a couple other people on here, is like, how is it possible to let skill sets atrophy because we're offloading things to artificial intelligence or a large language model? Yeah, definitely, 100%. And you should be conscious of that, right? If I'm not doing this skill anymore, what am I giving up? What skill set am I potentially atrophying, right? And you might say, well, hey, that's a skill that I think is important to me or important to my livelihood. I should really retain that, right? Like thinking, it's a really important thing. You definitely need to continue to build that skill and work on it and become, hopefully better over time. And so you don't want it to just think for you, which is definitely a possibility in a lot of cases. And it's not the case I'm going to be making here at all, is that you should let it do your thinking for you. In fact, I think you should use it to improve things like that. And you can if you utilize these tools correctly. But anyways, let me share with you some of the things where I feel this has really benefited me, specifically in the automotive side of things, in my business, in fixing cars. You can take this out into your normal life and apply it in a bunch of different ways as well. Maybe I'll touch on that a little bit, but my main focus is going to be here. It's the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. How am I utilizing it day to day in those? So I've talked about this on the show before. The first thing that really was like, holy cow, this is an awesome tool that I discovered with the LLM. Now, I had done a presentation at Vision in, I think that was 23. I did that, where I did, an explanation of utilizing an LLM in automotive. And I was kind of like throwing some ideas out there of like, okay, well, if we attach a PDF to it, because at that point you needed an extension in order to do that. Now it's so easy to attach anything you want to it. But I was kind of playing around with, well, these are the ways that it could be used. And the way that I use it most right now, I didn't predict. And I think that will be true going into the future too, is like we haven't even really come to understand exactly what it's going to look like as this technology progresses and like the biggest needle that it's going to move, right? It's kind of like the internet. Like everybody had predictions and they invested their money in a certain way, and there was a lot of bust there as far as the websites and the money that people invested, because they didn't exactly know, which companies were going to come out on top and the usefulness in what way. But obviously it was a game changer for a number of things, right? And AI is, definitely fits that bill as well. Anyways, the number one way that I found myself using this was doing a talk to text, right? Letting it use the transcribe feature where you just hit the little microphone, you blab, it turns it into text, and then you feed it into the prompt. That is your prompt, right? And then what I'm having it do for me is rewrite my explanation of what I did on a car, specifically for diagnostics, but I've used it for module programming where I need to make sure that there's details on a ticket, like, hey, this car ran poorly before and after the ECM replacement, or hey, there's a broken wire at the DLC that prevented my tool from powering up, so I jumped power in order to communicate. But if the shop tries to talk to this car, they're going to have issues, right? Sometimes I want detail on the programming side of things too, but for diagnostics, I will take my phone, I'll talk into it, I'll give it the explanation of what I'm doing, and I'll give it a ton of detail, an annoying amount of detail. And remember that, because I'm going to be bringing that up a few different times throughout, but I will give it all of the context and the detail, and I talk. And I can talk way faster than I can type. Maybe that's not true of everybody out there, but for me personally, I can get a ton of information out vocally much faster than it would be for me to type it out. And again, all of the detail, all of the context, I let it transcribe, I put it in, and I have it set up in a project, which I'll talk about that as well. And this is ChatGPT that I use, but I'm sure you could set this up in Gemini or Grok or Claude or whatever version of a large language model you prefer. Go for it. But I like the ChatGPT setup that we have. Plus, there is this is maybe off in the weeds, but the business version of ChatGPT at least according to them and what they say, is they contain your data. They're not training the model on the information that you're giving it so that everything else out there is using your specific data, which for what I'm doing, I actually appreciate. Anyways, off in the weeds there. I have it set up in a project to rewrite the information that I give it in a formal professional manner with bullet points, with a structure like concern, findings, conclusion, that sort of stuff. Like I've given it all these instructions ahead of time of this is the output that I want from you. And I just talk, I press go, it rewrites it, I copy it, I paste it into the invoice. Now, you do want to check it. For all this stuff, you want to check it because it makes mistakes. And I think it says that right under the prompt bar. Like, make sure to check it. ChatGPT makes mistakes, and they do. They can go off in the weeds too. But the more you dial it in and you give it the correct criteria and the correct prompts, the less you have to babysit it, right? It will actually learn what you're after in a lot of cases and just become better and better as time goes on. And I'm sure that's improvements on the back end with what they're doing, right? It's version 4, version 5, and there's improvements there, but it will actually learn what you want out of it the more that you interact with it as well. Maybe that's a scary thing to say, but it's what it seems like is that I have to do less corrections on these things. So the reason I use it for that is it saves me a ton of time, and it's made the documentation on our invoices for what we're doing 10 times better than what they were when we were typing them out. And I've typed out invoices since I was started as a technician. And I remember my old boss saying, hey, like the best thing you can do is put a story on there and give as much detail as possible, because you'll either need to refer back to that. You know, if this car comes back at some point, maybe somebody else needs to refer back to it. It's value for the customer so they can see all of the things that we actually did on the vehicle. It helps us out in defense in case we're accused of doing or not doing something, because it's all there. And so I would type all this out, and it was a big chunk of my day if you added it up, right? 5-10 minutes here, 5-10 minutes here. Again, I'm kind of a slow typer. I'll just admit that. Maybe you aren't, but it still takes up time. Even if you're a fast typer, it's taking up time. Where this is, I can blab for 20 seconds. I can hit go, copy, paste, I'm done. And it's better than what I would have been able to type out just by myself. Now, am I atrophying some typing skills, some writing skills? Yeah, probably. Most likely I am. Do I feel like that is something valuable that I 100% need? I don't know. I guess, in my opinion, I wasn't that great at it to begin with. And this gives us a faster and more professional output to the customer, saving us time so that we can move on to the next job. I guess for me, I want the time that I spend developing skill sets to be put in different areas than writing up invoices. I've made that decision, and we do it for our team as well. And again, the output and the documentation that we have is so much better than what we used it for before. Now, that was the first like real big light bulb of like, holy cow, yeah, I could be using this every day within the business. I also transfer that into recording notes for our database, right? I've mentioned before on here that I record information from cars that we fix that were maybe a challenge, or we learn something new, or we need to capture some piece of data that will help us again in the future. Now, I've just in the past been using Google Drive and Google Docs, and I'd have a folder for different vehicles. And when I had fixed something and I need to write it down, I'd go in and I'd type out a few notes. So there'd be, 3-4 sentences, maybe a couple data values, maybe I throw a picture in there. But now I can do exactly what I said about the invoices, but do it for the database notes. And I can give it all the nitty gritty details right after I'm done with the car, by the way. I don't have to wait until the next morning or later that night. I just do it at the car, and then I have that project set up a little bit differently, different context of like, hey, here's what I'm after. I want a structured output for the, listing the car, maybe the engine, what the problem was, what we saw, like measured values, what a technician working on this car in the future would need to know, and some searchable keywords. Okay. And then I talk into it, I get the output, copy, paste, and I put it into our Google Drive so that we have it for future reference. And again, with searchable keywords. So when we go into our drive and we're searching, a particular code or something like that, that helps us get to the document that we need to a little bit faster. So we transferring information that way as well. Now, what really dialed in the process of those two things for me was setting up the projects within ChatGPT. So, and again, other large language models are going to have stuff like this. Now, you can give your large language model, overall instructions on how you want it to react or what you want it to know about you. There's a setting for that, but you can build a project which within that project, it has specific instructions. Okay, and this is really important that you give it specific context for exactly the output that you want when you go into that project, right? So I have a project just for creating invoice documentation. I have a project just for creating database notes, and those have different instructions, right? We've got the engine that is ChatGPT and the large language model, but it has context of exactly what I want. And you can attach files to these projects as well. And for certain things I do, this is the piece of information that I would like you to reference. And those are two really important things to understand about these large language models, okay? Now there's probably three really important things to understand is that giving it the instructions and the context that you want is really important. And you can do this as an overarching umbrella for within that project. So everything you do, it relates back to those instructions, right? But then within the prompt itself, right? That's the other really important part is how you prompt the large language models completely changes the output that you're going to get. And you can give it very vague prompts and you might still get something that's okay, but it's very inaccurate. Or you can give it excruciatingly exact prompts with all kinds of context. And I would suggest doing that in most cases. And going back to what I was talking about with the invoice documentation in the database, just talk to it. Again, if you're a really fast typer, then you can type too, but I found it that I can just blab. And again, give it an annoying amount of detail about what you're after. Say, I want it like this, but I don't want this, and I want you to look and consider this. Oh, and by the way, also that. Give it all of that stuff, which if you were to talk to a person and say all of those things, it'd be like, hang on, I got to write all this down and consider all this. But it's able to take that into the process when it gives you an output. But I found the more context, the more information, the more guidelines you give it, the better output that you get. Okay, so that's prompting and then using the instructions and putting some effort into making those instructions as well. There's some stuff there that you can do to make some really good instructions for these projects. But then to prompt well, as in addition to that, you start to get the best outputs possible from this. Now, the other part of it is information. Hey, have you ever been faced with the challenge of sourcing, installing, and programming a used control module in a vehicle? I know a lot of us have. It seems to be happening more and more often today with the volume of control modules on vehicles, the cost of some new ones, or even the availability of new control modules. In some cases, used may be the only option. So what do you do here? I strongly recommend checking out SJ Auto Solutions and Tommy Oliva. Tommy offers a cloning service for used control modules to make these things plug and play for the vehicle that you're working on. In a lot of cases, he is also able to source the control modules if you're unable to locate one for the vehicle that you're working on. But once you get connected with Tommy, he's going to offer fantastic support from start to finish to make sure that that control module is going to work in your application. He's also got tech support that he offers through his website, along with some free resources there as well on information about used control module programming. So make sure to check out SJ Auto Solutions. I can't recommend that enough. And that's where these things really shine and where I feel like the average user of a large language model doesn't understand the power of these things right now, is what information they have reference to. And this was way back when I did my presentation at Vision, and I did a class down in Orlando on it, is the power of these things, right? The engine behind it is wild, right? The GPUs and the transformers, and I'm weak on understanding exactly how all that stuff works. I think people that build these things have also admitted like they don't really know everything about exactly how it works, but man, it works really well. Like that's so powerful. But in order for that to really benefit us and mean something to us, it needs the correct information. And, I've seen people send me stuff or post stuff about like, look at this stupid answer this thing gave. Like, oh, we're fine. This can't figure out anything. And in most of the cases, it's because of the information that you've either given it, not given it, or it has access to that really changes its ability to give you the proper answer or what you're looking for, the output that you're expecting or wanting. Now, when it comes to, experts in a particular field or subject, humans are still probably the best in real specific areas. But again, it just comes down to, well, what information does it have access to? So you want to consider that. Now, again, within these projects that you build, you can attach certain files. Okay, you can attach a 300-page PDF and say, hey, I'd like you to reference this when you're working in this particular project, right? This is the user's manual for Otis. This is the user's manual for QuickBooks. This is, the key reference I would like you to use for this project for these outputs. And you can build as many of these projects as you want. At least I haven't found a limit yet for different tasks. And so when you have a specific thing that you want to get done, you go into that project and it's already set up to cater that output to what you're looking for in those instructions. And that changes how you utilize this just absolutely in leaps and bounds instead of just hopping on there and giving it a prompt for something. The other thing here is too, you can prompt with more than just text, right? You can give it URLs, like links to things. You can put files in there, whether that be an audio file, a spreadsheet, even scan tool or scope captures, right? If you save them in the right format, put them into a CSV or a .mat file, you can have it analyze picoscope data. And it's pretty wild what it can do without a whole lot of background. I posted something in a group just recently where I put in a relative compression and vacuum waveform, and I didn't really give it a whole lot to go with. I just said, hey, channel A is starter amperage, channel B is a pulse sensor in the intake. I'm cranking the engine. Let me know what you think about the mechanical health of the engine. And it figured out the RPM during cranking. It figured out that it was a 6-cylinder engine, and it gave a really good breakdown, and then it asked me if I wanted to do, 4 other things with it, and it was really impressive. And you have to play around with that specific application of the Pico files, but you can get stuff in there, right? Now, that's different than just, just putting a picture of a waveform into a prompt, which you can do. You can do images as well, and I think the ability of it to assess images has improved, but it probably is a lot weaker than something actual that is data based, whether that be a spreadsheet or, something like this where it has actual, data points they can assess. But so that's the thing is like, okay, well, how do I get it the information that I want it to assess? What form can I put it into that it works with? Right. And here's the other thing, and this is what I kind of want to circle back to, is if you work with it, you can ask questions of like, hey, this is my goal. I want to have you help me with this. How do you think you'd best be able to do that, right? What do you need from me in order to get X output? And then it can kind of teach you how to best interact with it to get the best outcome. But that's not the only thing that you can learn from using these tools. And this is where, hey, we're just going to offload all of our thinking to this, and that's definitely possible. But you can flip that on its head and you can actually learn a ridiculous amount. Now, okay, you do have to be careful because where is it pulling its information from? Sure. But you should be careful of that for everything, right? Podcasts and books and YouTube. And I mean, where do we learn stuff from? How often is the information that people are going to be basing their content on incorrect or missing key information? But we're taking that as, hey, this is the gospel, right? We're this is how it is. But they're missing information. And it's the same thing for a large language model. So, take things with a grain of salt, but if you can give it specific context, maybe you give it specific information, maybe you give it a PDF on a user's manual of a scan tool you want to learn and say, hey, here's my goal. I want to be very proficient in this particular scan tool application. Here's the information. Let's build a plan that you can help educate me on how to use this. And then you can have it quiz you and say, hey, okay, it will ask you a question, you answer the question back, and then, assess me and help me so that I, make sure that I understand this correctly before we move on. And you can do this in a voice mode too. There is a voice mode where it just goes back and forth with you. You don't have to type anything. You can do this while you're driving around in your car. You can be learning things if that's a way that you want to spend your time. But for me, it is. I want to increase my knowledge in specific areas. And this is a tool to do that, very powerful on the technical side of things as far as processing information and creating questions about data to assess whether I understand that or not. And then here's the other thing too, is it's never going to get tired or bored or annoyed of my questions. I can just keep going with it and going with it, right? And I mean, going down that road, there's a real possibility that AI replaces a lot of education in the world. That's looking, farther out into the future. But man, you can learn so much interacting with these tools. And that's the way that I'm trying to utilize it in that regard, of not just replacing the functions that I would normally do, but amplifying the stuff that I already do or want to do more of or want to learn more of. And I can tell you, I have learned a ton about so many different subjects using this, well beyond automotive as well. Things that just were kind of maybe I considered like out of reach, or I don't even know where I would begin to learn about this particular subject. But you can ask, and it's actually pretty impressive what it can come up with. Now, like OpenAI has trained ChatGPT on the internet, essentially, and a lot of the other large language models have as well. So again, yeah, there's BS information out there. But you can fact check it. You can ask it like, okay, well, how accurate is this information? Is there a potential bias here as far as what I'm getting? Again, but you're going to find that with human information as well, right? So no matter what you're doing here, you have to be careful with that. But it's really impressive what it can do with the information it has access to. And again, you give it the context of this is what I'm after. This is my goal. Here are the criteria I want you to work with. It's crazy what it can come up with. The last thing I'll mention on here that I found has been useful and I'm still developing is just a sounding board during a challenging problem like diagnostics, like programming a control module on the board level. It's pretty impressive. If you snap a picture of a circuit board where you can, see the chips and the legs and the detail, it's really impressive what it can come up with. Now, it's not always accurate, definitely not, but it can get you moving along in the right direction, and it can find chip families, and it can find programmers that work with particular chips, and you can get off in the weeds for sure, but you probably are going to get off in the weeds all by your own too, is at least a guide. But you can use it as a sounding board as you're going through, like, hey, does this make sense what I'm doing or seeing right now? And you can tell the car, like, hey, I'm working on this particular car. I have this particular problem. Here's what I've tried. Here's what I'm seeing. Can you help me, brainstorm some ideas because I'm at an impasse right here. And sometimes it'll pull really useful information from the internet that just, silver bullet. That's not what I'm after here. I'm after of like a back and forth of like, okay, all right, try that, try that, try that. Oh, okay, that's something I hadn't thought of yet, or just, didn't use in my process. Maybe I skipped over it. Okay, that's a really good idea. And if you're able to couple that with some of your own information that you've gathered together over a period of time, it becomes even more powerful. And that's what I'm working on right now, is linking the database that we've created through ST Mobile to one of these large language models. And there's companies out there that have done something like this. We just talked to Brendan a little while ago, and they have their the Tech Tina, that is a language model that has information, based off of their forum that you can interact with, that it has reference to when answering questions. We're working on our own, internal database there so that we can have that set up as well. So like all of the data that we've captured over the last 5 years or so that I've been recording stuff can then be accessed by a particular model. Now, you do want to consider the like, hey, does that mean everybody that has ChatGPT can access this? Again, according to what they have, the business model does not. So you do want to consider like, what am I feeding out there? I think having information that is not publicly accessed is actually going to be really beneficial in the near term, because these language models are trained on the open internet in a lot of cases, and stuff behind a paywall is still that, behind a paywall. And so you can use that as an internal database, build your own model. It's a lot of work that goes into that, but you can still retain that for yourself or for your company, which gives you, maybe a little bit of an advantage in a particular aspect. Or, this is going way off, but it's a potential where you could sell that bulk of data that you've collected off of real world experiences at some point or another. You decide like, okay, I'd like to, cash in on this at some point or another. I'm done using it. It's a lot of data. You can't get this unless you've had these real world experiences. And, potentially down the road, some company is willing to buy that. I don't know. That might be just speculating, but we have worked really hard over the last few years to capture as much data as possible. We continue to do it every day. And I think that's a pretty important part of what we're doing specifically, because we run into new problems almost every day, and continuing to build that database really helps us in the future as, okay, maybe we see that same problem again, maybe we see something similar, but now again, with the technology that's out there, we could have a large language model help us interact with that bulk of data to help us during the day-to-day. With that diagnostic assistant, if you will, one of the things I'd suggest everybody try, if you haven't, is the deep research mode. So when you go to put the prompt in, you can pull down and you can see deep research. Now, what this does is it takes probably about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on exactly what you're after. You're giving it the context, and a lot of times it will even ask for more details before it goes off. And then you set it off to do this research, if you will, and it does really in-depth search based off of the question or the outcome that you're looking for. And it will come up with a really detailed report. And again, the context that you give it, the details that you give it, the specifics for your outcome all change here, but it's much, much more detailed and in-depth than what you would just get from a normal prompt. You'll get links to certain web pages, and it will find things that the normal search, if you will, just doesn't come up with or is less detailed about. But you do have to wait, and depending on your pay plan, you only get so many of those a month. But what I'll do here is, if I'm dealing with a weird problem, something that's kicking my butt, something I haven't dealt with before, I don't really seem to have any more direction with my normal paths, I'll set this up and say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. Can you help me find X, Y, Z? Here's all the context. I'll hit it. It usually will come back with a few more questions of specifics. Okay, do you want this? And how about this? And do you want me to blank? Yes, no, here's what I want. Come back in 10 minutes and you get a really good detailed report. Now, sometimes there are things out there that there's just not that much info out on the internet or whatever resource it has, so you can't do much with it. But sometimes it's like, oh, wow, this is way more information. Or for me to find all of this information through like old school Google searching would have taken me hours, if not days, to get all this, organized and put together in this detailed report. But it's been really good to get me going in the right direction on a lot of stuff. We're up against it, especially doing what we're doing here in the mobile world, working on all makes and models, taking on the weirdest problems. Man, to have an assistant like this and a resource like this is so huge. So that's kind of where I'm going to wrap this one up today. Again, I'm hoping to have some people on to have another conversation about this, AI in the automotive space in general, and maybe some of the downsides or things that you really should consider as you use this. But I also want to share, like, hey, I'm using this stuff every day, and it's been a game changer for me in a number of ways, and I'm still learning how to do it. And I think that's really important, is that you learn how to utilize these, and then you can, decide whether it's worthwhile or if it makes sense for you. But those that learn this stuff in the short term, at least, are going to be very successful compared to those that don't. That's my opinion. So anyways, hopefully you found that interesting. If you've got some interesting use cases for AI or large language models, let me know. Share it, put it in the Facebook group. Love to hear about it. I'll share what I've got there too. But other than that, let's all get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.